Market validation is something I've spoken about on the podcast in the past, and I've also written on the over on the Instagram handle and on the Medium page. Now, the idea behind market validation, especially for those of you who've been listening to the podcast recently, maybe the last 2 or 3 recordings, the whole idea of market validation is you have this idea that you want to bring to the market, no matter what your industry is. You have a main thesis, and then you want to see whether this thesis is viable, whether people buy this product or this idea, and whether there is a substantial market here that you can exploit. Now, some of you listening to the podcast will say, what does this have to do with me? I'm a wedding photographer, I'm a wedding planner, I'm a wedding video person. And so all this technical talk about market validation has absolutely nothing to do with me. And you are far away from the truth. Because the thing is, a lot of us who come into the wedding and the event space are creatives at heart. And so we have a unique bent, a unique style, or some peculiar thing that we want to bring to the table and that we believe sets us apart from everybody else in the field. For instance, when I was coming into the wedding game back when I was in Lagos, close to about 10 years ago, my whole thing was I do not like Photoshop. I think Photoshop is excessive. I would only like to photograph brides who like being natural. And I think that there is a market for more natural, candid style photography. Now, my mom and a couple of people who were around at the time, they figured that wasn't going to fly, that if the market wants Photoshop, then by all means go ahead and give them Photoshop. But I decided to stick to my guns, and I was going to run through this whole thing of keeping things clean, keeping things candid and simple, and not being photoshopped, or at the very least not being excessively photoshopped. So that was the kind of value proposition that I wanted to bring to the market at the time, and I'm sure that there are some of you wedding photographers who can relate. Now, some of you who think, on the other hand, that photography should be highly stylized, sophisticated, and idealistic, and you bring that to the table as well. So we all bring different kinds of creative bents to the table, and it's not just limited to wedding photographers alone. Wedding planners and decor people and cake artists also bring their own, bring these slants and elements of style to the table. For instance, my friend, or rather my acquaintance that I've spoken about before on the podcast, Paola, she doesn't do much wedding cakes anyway, but that's because she's more of a novelty cake person. And so for her, that's the big thing about cakes, the whole thing about novelty. Something new, something that hasn't been done before, let your cake be unique. And so even when she does accept wedding commissions, it's that's part of the whole deal. It has to be novel. So that's what she's bringing to the table. And then, of course, for event planners and for decor people, some of them have particular ideas about what is sophisticated, what is high life, what is tasteful, what is modern, things like that. And they bring this to the table as well. So even though we're not dealing in products per se, we're not selling trinkets or selling cars or whatever, there still is something that we're bringing to the table that we need the market to validate. So for me, there's that central question: are people willing to pay for photography without Photoshop? And for you, the other wedding photographer who wants things to be extremely stylized, are people willing to pay extra for all that extra effigy that you're going to bring to the table? And then for you who likes to keep things rustic, let's say you're a decor person, is there a market for rustic themed type of weddings? So there is a certain element of market validation that we have to be consciously engaged in right from the beginning. And that's the key thing here, why I say consciously, because a lot of us have this key thesis, but then we don't consciously pursue it, and we're just trotting along, and that's pretty much what I did, and a lot of us do. We have this thesis, and we don't chase it all the way to its logical conclusion. So, now, how do we go about validating our ideas? So for no Photoshop photographers like me, how do we go about validating that idea? Well, we do it through the sales process. And that's one of the reasons why the sales process is really handy, because if you engage with the sales process, and you put your foot down and you go full speed ahead and you try to validate this idea, you're going to get key, very important feedback along the process about whether this is working or whether this is not working. Because quite frankly, if you stay in your house or you stay in your studio or you stay in your office or wherever and hope that the sales come to you and the sales don't come, you might end up saying there's no market here for these kinds of weddings, or there's no market here for no Photoshop type brides. But the reality is that there could be a market, but you never pushed it, you never tried. So to validate your idea, you have to go consciously and deliberately, maybe even aggressively, into selling. Now, selling doesn't involve hitting people over the head. For the purposes of this podcast episode, let's just break it down into three simple processes. So there's prospecting, there's qualifying, and then there's customer service. Now, prospecting is going out to look for people to talk to. So for those of you who, if you're a wedding planner and you want to push this whole rustic thing, or if you're if you're a baker and you want to push this whole novel thing, or you're like me and you want to push this whole candid, clean photography thing, no Photoshop, then what you should be doing in the prospecting stage is trying to ask yourself some questions. Brides who like novel cakes, where do they hang out? So if you think they hang out on the Wedding Wire or all those foreign websites, because maybe brides who hang out on Bella Niger are too, local minded or whatever, and they'll just do pretty much the same thing that everybody is doing. So if Adesua or Tommy did this kind of cake and it's on Bella Niger, everybody's going to want the same kind of cake as Adesua. That's the lady who married Banky W, I believe. So if you think that they are on Wedding Wire, then that's where you ought to be spending more of your time, on Wedding Wire, maybe advertising there, if you can afford the advertising rates, because I hear that they're quite expensive. But that is part of the whole prospecting process. This group of people that I'm chasing after, where do they most likely hang out? And then you go and hang out there as well and see how you can get them to raise their hands, either by advertising or trying to engage, build up conversations, putting up content, and things of that nature. So that is the first part, prospecting. And that is the reason why, for those of you who are long-term listeners, you will know that I'm a fan of wedding shows, and I really think you should go out there. That's wedding expos, because it is a physical way of getting to where the brides are. Because for now, well, at least until COVID hit and the lockdowns were a thing in March last year, it's a very good way to get face to face with the brides one-on-one, and then you get a feel of which kind of brides attend which kind of shows, and then you can plan from there. So prospecting, looking for people to talk to. Now, the whole thing about qualifying is now you already have someone that you're talking to face to face, or maybe over the internet, or you guys are chatting on WhatsApp. And qualifications is about asking questions to find out if they have that need that you want to satisfy and all other expectations are in sync concerning budget and if there is an urgent need for your product or service. Because if there is a need for a novelty cake, if this lady, the bride that you're speaking to, actually does love novelty cakes, and I can afford the 200k price that you're asking. But the thing is, she only got proposed to recently, and he hasn't spoken to her people yet, and so they don't have a wedding date for now, but they're looking at 2025 and blah blah blah. If it's that kind of conversation, everything matches except the sense of urgency, because they really don't have a date. So she is not qualified in the strict sense. She's someone whose number you should hang on to and keep in touch with, because she could be a good prospect for that 2025 date that they have in mind. Okay, no, 2025 is too far. We're in 2021. Okay, so let's say 2022. So that possible 2022 date that they might have. So that's what qualification is about, basically. So for wedding photographers, it will be those kinds of questions of, what's your ideal wedding day coverage supposed to look like? Is there any photograph on my Instagram handle that you like? What are the ideal images that you are looking for? Things of that nature that will kind of give you a sense of what style they want, what it is that they're looking for, and so if there is a match or not. So that's the whole qualifying process. Is there a match? Now, assuming that there's a match and we're okay on the money and we've gone ahead to secure the deal, the real crux of the matter is going to come out in your customer service process afterwards. You have to reach out, do a debrief, be sure that everybody's happy, and then you need to get key feedback about what worked and what didn't work, because that is where you're going to know if your idea has been validated by the market or not. Now, in my own case, I thought that being this whole thing of no Photoshop, I assumed that that was going to be the key. But in the customer service process that has followed over the years, me keeping in touch with everybody, hope you're happy, you like the albums, everything, what did I do right, what could we have done differently, why did you recommend me to so and so. From asking all these questions, I found out that it turns out that the unique selling proposition for me was not even the no Photoshop thing, because I have two brides I remember who made me really, really happy because they said I was tired of being Photoshopped. But it seems that for the majority of people, I heard things like, oh, you were nice, you were professional, you were on time, and all that other stuff. In the beginning, which broke my heart, because what I was trying to achieve was what I think is a much more elegant style of photography. But then I found out that was other intangibles that turned out to be my unique value proposition. So okay, yeah, so this is just an example to show you how we can validate the ideas and why you should go through this whole process, because at the end of the day, you will find out whether your idea works. So if you're this rustic style wedding planner, you will now is through going through this process that you figure out whether there's a market for rustic weddings or whether there's a market for novel cakes. Or you might find out that even though you've been pushing this whole rustic thing or no Photoshop thing or novel cake thing, you'll find out that your unique value proposition was something else entirely, because you could be pushing novel cakes, but you find out that what the market is actually saying about you is that you have the best tasting cakes ever. Or you might be pushing best tasting cakes, natural ingredients, what else? No allergies or whatever. And then you find out that what the market really values about you is your what's it called? That's for these cake people. When they do the finishings, and the finishings and all the artsy stuff, the sugar craft and all the lining and all the design that you do on the cake. So you might find out that is your unique value proposition, that's what people value about you. So so that's why this exercise is useful, this whole thing about market validation, because you validate your idea, then you know that you can increase the speed and go full speed all ahead, because this is something that works. And in going through it, you might find out that you didn't quite validate your idea, but you found something else which happens to be your value proposition. And then you can now take that to be as part of your messaging, and then key through with that, and then just speed through all the way. So if if in the beginning you were this whole novel cakes person, and you found out that you have the best tasting cakes ever, then in your marketing material, you probably ought to lead with that you have the best tasting cakes ever, and then novel cakes and all the other things that you like will follow on from that in your marketing material. Okay, so we've gone over the 10-minute mark, and let me wrap it up here. So, that's it. You have a unique idea that you want to bring to the market. It applies to those of us who are wedding professionals as well, because we have certain ideas around style and sophistication that we want to bring to the table. And so we should go on and make sure that the market, we get some market feedback and secure some market validation. So that means we have to prospect right, we need to qualify right to be sure that we're a match with our customers. And our customer service and follow-up should be on point, so that we find out what it is, the main reasons that the people actually went with us in the first place. So thank you very much for listening to the Sales for the Nigerian Wedding Industry podcast. I'm your host, Abuja-based event and wedding photographer Tavishima Ayede. Thank you very much for your time and attention. I'll catch you guys at the next recording.